Hello! It is finally time for another dupe guide. These are all new dupes that I'm going to be discussing today. I tried really hard to double check and make sure that the things I'm covering I haven't covered in previous videos. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll link the playlist below. Feel free to check them out. Today we're going to be going through all of my single eyeshadow dupes that I have. I try my hardest not to get dupes, but as you can see, it doesn't always work out. So I figured I would share the dupes that I have with you so that way hopefully you don't make the same dupe purchases that I did, unless you want to. My parameters for a dupe are that they look the same on the eyes. So some of these are closer than others, but regardless, I'll kind of walk through and tell you what I think about how close the dupe is. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're more cost effective, just that if you have brand preferences or maybe already even own some of these shadows, hopefully it helps you from getting things in the future that you already have. And with that, if you want to see the dupes that I have found, then go ahead and just keep on watching and subscribe. We're going to go ahead and start with this palette. This is what I consider to be my best dupes, are what exist here. So first up, we have the shade Centennial Wheel by Copacetic Cosmetics. It's a very flaky multi-chrome shadow with like a neon hot pink kind of shade that goes to an orange and then kind of a golden green color. I will say, this one I feel like does need a glitter glue. It's pretty chunky and it doesn't smooth out super well, but it is more affordable than our next option. So here it is, and you can see it is really chunking up where I first laid it down. So that's why I'm saying I think a glitter glue really helps it out. But the one that I want to compare it to is Flare Star by Terra Moons. You can see they look identical on my finger. This one from Terra Moons also does have a flakier texture, which I feel like you can kind of see in that base, but I will say it is smoother than the one from Copacetic, although both would benefit from a glitter glue. But you can see that one does smooth out better than this one from Copacetic does, which really is chunked up on there. So there they are. They are essentially the same. I didn't look up prices before this video, so take these with a grain of salt, but I believe that the Copacetic version of this shade is $13 and the Terra Moons version is $17.95. So there's a pretty big difference, and I think on the eyes you could not tell which is which. I'm gonna try my best to show shifts in this video so you can at least see like that orange that it shifts to, and it does go to a limey kind of green, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get that element of the shift. Next up is another dupe that I would argue is spot on. This first shade is Uncharted by Copacetic Cosmetics again. It's a black-based multi-chrome that has like an olive green to a kind of, I don't even know how to describe the color that it shifts to. That like kind of brown color that you see, there's something a little rosy about it, and then it kind of goes to a gold, but it's definitely a more subtle multi-chrome. I'm comparing it to the shade Everest from Shine by SD, and look at that. I mean, they are like the same. This one maybe is like a touch cooler than this one, but on the eyes I don't think you'd be able to tell any difference. Personally, I don't love black-based multi-chromes as much. I find them kind of hard to work with considering how light my skin tone is, but if you were going to get one, I feel like if I remember correctly, the Copacetic one is $13 again, and the Shine by SD one might be like $15, so it may be a better deal to go with the Copacetic. And here is my best attempt to show you those shifts. You can kind of see that green to that reddish color. Next up is a color dupe, but not a formula dupe. So this first shade is from Terra Moons, and the second is from Lethal Cosmetics. This is called Cosmic Collision from Terra Moons, and this is Singularity from Lethal. You can see they've got that same purple base color that shifts to like a blue and then a greeny gold kind of color. But texture-wise, they're very different. So depending on your texture preference, you may like one more than the other. This is the Lethal one. It's much smoother and less sparkly compared to the Terra Moons one, which is a little bit chunkier and thicker as a formula, but does have a lot more sparkle to it. And you can see the Lethal one is a little bit duller than the Terra Moons one, but those shifts are exactly alike. And I think this one, again, from Terra Moons is $17.95, and this one from Lethal is like $16 or something like that. This next one is kind of cheating because I have swatched some of these already, but I do have a new shade amongst them. This is Gleam by Glaminatrix Cosmetics, and it is identical to something like Transmutation, which is a little chunkier from Copacetic Cosmetics, or Starburst from Terra Moons, which is really, really similar. Maybe a little bit thicker in the sparkle compared to the one from Glaminatrix. And then lastly, I thought I'd throw in this, which is a single shade I got from It's Belle. It's from the like Stone palette or something. I forget what it was called, but I think it's the shade Rosewater, and it is available as a single, so I thought I'd throw it in there and show how similar they are. You can see that base color has different depth in the different shades, but that shift is the same. And here I'll try to get maybe a little bit of a different shift to show. But all four of these are exactly the same. I feel like the one from Copacetic may be like $1 less than the one from Terra Moons, but those two are definitely the best affordable options out of all four of these. Next up, this is a newer shade from Lethal. It was released on Black Friday. This is Ethology. It's a yellow base with a very fine sparkle that goes from a kind of like bluish green to a pink, depending on the angle. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get that pink to really show on camera, but it does shift to more of a light pink on the edges. I wanted to compare it to Vela from Davina. I think that Vela may be like $1 less, but I know some of you are watching from Europe, so it may be hard to get access to a brand like Davina, and if that is true, you finally have a shade that is exactly the same as Vela. They have the same pink shift on the edge, which I'm sorry you can't see, but it definitely is there. The only difference is that the Davina one has a little bit more of a thick sparkle, whereas the Lethal one is a lot more fine. Next up, we have an Adept single, which I actually don't think Adept makes singles anymore. But if you ever were pining over ACD10, I think that this was, it doesn't have a sticker on the back. But if you were pining after this shade, I wanted to point out that Menagerie ink defense is pretty much the exact same. It's got the same shift. Right now you see that really striking teal kind of shade, but it does also shift to a pinkish purple on the edges depending on the light, besides the red-brown base. Like, it's a different shift that I just don't think I'm able to show. But you can see, even without that shift showing, that these two shades are exact. So if you ever wanted the one from Adept, the one from Menagerie, just the same. This next one is one that I more recently discovered, and this first shade is a Looksee shade. This is the shade Burnt Toast, and I know Looksee is doing a thing where they're clearing out a lot of inventory right now, so I'm not sure if this is one of the shades that's going, but I figured I'd include it anyways because it is a spot-on dupe. So if you don't know, I've done a lot of videos on Looksee. Looksee has $3 single eyeshadows. This is that shade Burnt Toast. I wanted to compare it to the $8 shadow Harvest from Terra. It feels a lot thicker, and it's probably easier to apply, whereas that one from Looksee needs built up to get the same opacity. But once they are there, they are like the same shade. They've got kind of a reddish brown base, kind of coppery going on with a golden shift to it. Down here, I've recently made the discovery that Clionadh carving is really similar to the shade Get Busy from Shine by SD. Shine by SD is a little bit more satiny, I would say, in the finish, but that shift that they have is essentially identical. Look at that. That is so close. They both do have this kind of like pinkish thing that they do as well on the sides, kind of like these two up at the top from Menagerie and Adept, but that base color is pretty similar. The texture is different, like I was saying, so I feel like that Clionadh one shows up a little bit chunkier and not quite as smooth looking on the base, but depending on what formula you like, I definitely think that you could get one or the other and you wouldn't necessarily need both. Here we've got the Davina Cult Classic shade Clionadh. It's a really beautiful duochrome that goes from like a kind of pink to a gold. So right now you're getting that strong pink. Let me see if I can get that gold. You can kind of see it a little bit, but it does go to a very striking like kind of peachy gold shade. I wanted to compare it to Vigorous from Shine by SD, which is a little tiny bit darker, but the shift on it is the same. So it's got a pinky red kind of thing going on that shifts to that gold, which I'm not sure how well I can get it to show, but you can maybe see it on my fingers too. That shift, very, very similar. Definitely don't need both. I think that these might be pretty similar in price, so it really is just a preference. So a side note on that one of the shimmer shades in the Sashimi City palette from Kaleidos is also very similar to these, but I didn't pull it out since I'm doing single shadows today. Next up, we've got the Shine by SD shade Twinkle, which is a bubblegum pink with a green sparkle in it. It's a really fine base, like it's not super opaque to begin with, and that shimmer is a little satiny. It's really, really fine, and it looks more like a sheen than any like distinct sparkle within it. I wanted to compare it to the shade Bubblegum from Looksee. This one is more affordable, but you can see it's literally the same exact shade, even down to like that sheer pink base. Look at that. Are those not exactly the same? Oh my gosh, total dupe. Those two did stain my hand a little bit, so I'll try to avoid swatching in that same spot. This shade is from Sugar Drizzle Polish. It's the shade Sugar Dew, and it's an iridescent shade with a kind of like pink base that shifts to a really strong like orangey gold to green to teal kind of shade. And next to that, I wanted to show you the shade Garden Picnic from Copacetic. They are the same. I feel like the Copacetic one is maybe a little bit more sparkly, but the shades that they turn are very, very similar. Definitely don't need both. And the one from Copacetic is $13, whereas the one from Sugar Drizzle I think is like $16, and the one from Copacetic is handmade, I'm pretty sure, so I would definitely go with the Copacetic on this one. This one I feel like is maybe a little less spot on. This first shade is from Shine by SD. It's called Problematic, and the second shade is from Terra and it's called Hydra. I feel like the one from Terra Moons might be a little bit deeper. This is that one from Shine by SD. You can see it's a little chunky. Shine by SD has a much drier formula than other brands. So again, it's a preference thing. This shade Hydra from Terra Moons is definitely the chunkiest shade I have from them. I'm not sure why, but it does feel a little bit drier. You can see though, the one from Terra Moons maybe doesn't go quite as blue, but that base color is the same, and that like purpley pink to blue is also very, very similar. And last but not least for this first palette, I've got the Terra Moon shade Aphelion, which is an Amazon exclusive, and I wanted to compare it to Glasswing from Looksee. This is $3 versus $8. And I think they're really similar. I actually compared Glasswing to the Terra Moon shade and Terra's last time, and though I do think that those are similar, I think that this is even closer. So the only real difference is that the one from Looksee goes a little bit more golden than the one from Terra Moons, but the one from Terra Moons does have something kind of gold about it as well. And the one from Looksee does get a little bit blue depending on the kind of like angle that you're looking at it from. And so because of that, I think that these are so similar. You don't need them both. And I would say that the Looksee one is a way better deal. I love Glasswing. I think that's a beautiful shadow. Next up, we've got in that second palette, some that aren't quite as close, but I still think that they fall within dupe category. And so this is the shade Celestial Petal from Terra Moons. This is the shade Aloha from Touch of Glam. And they are very, very similar. Although I will say I definitely prefer the Terra Moons one. I think it's a little bit less expensive. And I just am not a huge Touch of Glam fan. So both of those things combined, I would definitely say Celestial Petal is the way to go. I also think it has a stronger shift in it. They both are a light pink with a blue kind of sparkle throughout, but you can see that Terra Moons one is just so shiny compared to the Touch of Glam shade. I feel like this one is one of the least similar dupes that I have, but I thought I'd include it just in case. This is the Clionadh shade Torch, and this is the Copacetic shade Tango. They both have a kind of orange base that shifts to a pink, although I will say that Torch also shifts a little bit gold, and the texture on these is not the same. I'll go ahead and show you. This shade Torch, I think, is one of the shifting shimmers from Copacetic, so I feel like they need a glitter glue personally, but once you get it applied, they're really, really close with the shift. I'm trying to show you that this one goes a little bit more golden, but I'm not sure if I truly can. You can definitely see the orange shift here though, compared to that pink. These next two are actually from the same brand. These are both from Shine by SD. The first is the shade Next Level, and the next is the shade Bizarre. So you can see Bizarre has a deeper green base, and it also is more opaque. This one loses that green base when you apply it. But given how many brands are coming out with a shade very similar to Next Level right now, I thought I'd point out how close it is to Bizarre. This was a collab with M. Jones and Bizarre Volta, and I know a lot of people got shadows from that collab, so I just want to point out that like shades like Ganymede from Terra Moons or Mural from Clionadh, you might not necessarily need if you have this one because they're so similar. This one goes a little bit more pink, whereas you can see this one goes a little bit more like reddish pink. That's a little bit more purpley pink, but they both do have that gold and green shift in them. And so I really don't necessarily think that you need both because they are pretty close. So I just wanted to throw that out there in case you were considering getting a shade like this if you already have Bizarre. Although I would say between the two, I would probably pick Next Level over Bizarre if I could only keep one. So as a side note, for those who are curious about the new Seeking Shifts collab with Shine by SD, I freaking love it. It's so beautiful. But I mentioned before, I am not buying eyeshadows right now. I've got a lot of big expenses coming up, and so I'm skipping it for now, but I'm hoping it stays around long enough that I can get some later on. Next, we've got three that I think are pretty similar. This is the shade Reserve number 1 from Shine by SD. It's an iridescent shadow that goes from this blue to a pink, a really strong pinky purple. I think that this is going to be the best angle to show that to you. And honestly, I'm not sure how well it's picking up, but I'm trying my best. I wanted to compare it to two Looksee shades, which I honestly think are kind of duping each other. This is the shade Salted Caramel. Oh my god, I just got so much black in that. Let me try my best to make a decent swatch of this. But this is the shade Salted Caramel. Again, it does a blue to a kind of pink shift in it. And I recently got the shade Cookie Dough from Looksee, which I knew was going to be similar. And now I know exactly how similar. The answer, very, very similar. I would say that the difference is that this one's got a little bit more of like a cream base, whereas this one is completely transparent. But the shift in all three is very similar, so I definitely would suggest picking one and sticking with that. Next up, we've got the Terra Moon's shade Andromeda versus Looksee Pixie Dust. I know that in the pan, they look really different. The main difference is that the one from Looksee has a pink base, whereas the one from Terra Moon's is iridescent. But the shift in them is so similar that I think if you like this one from Looksee and you're okay with it not being iridescent, you're getting something very similar. So they both have a pink sparkle that goes to a gold in the shift. And that one from Looksee does lose a little bit of that base pigment, and they both have something kind of gray in the base once they're laid out. So they're definitely not the same, but they're similar for sure. I don't think you would necessarily need both. So there's that pink, and then there is kind of that gold shift in both. This next one, you kind of have to bear with me. I have the Looksee shade Margarita versus the Clionadh shade Embellishment. And on first glance, these are not the same. The one from Clionadh has a really deep mustard base, and it has a sparkle that shifts from a blue to a kind of pink, or I guess a green to a pink, very similar to the shift in Vela, but a lot deeper in the base. Margarita has a much brighter yellow base, but does have those same shifts of like that green to that pink, which I'm not sure I'm able to get. And you can see in the base, they are not the same. But with the help of any handy mustard yellow matte shadow, you can make Margarita look very, very similar to Embellishment. So here it is swatched over the top. And with that, I don't think you would need Embellishment because you can get such a similar effect. Look at that now. Look at those bases and the shift on top. They're really, really close. And so honestly, I feel like the Looksee shade is more versatile for what you're getting. And if you're not absolutely in love with the mustard yellow base, I think that this is the better choice because you can kind of get both within the one, and it's less expensive. So I wanted to throw that one out there, even though it does require an extra shadow to make it a true dupe. This next one I would say is like an 80% dupe. I am comparing the Touch of Glam shade The 21st to Cobblestone from Clionadh. So I will say the 21st does have more shifts in it. It's got a kind of gray base with a pink to green to gold shift in it. The Cobblestone shade doesn't go as vibrant of a green. It mostly sticks with that pink to like kind of gold, olivey kind of color. And I'm not even sure, there you can kind of see that this one has a stronger shift, but it's not even showing that green really. So it is there, I just am not quite able to capture it. I would say they're similar, but not the same for sure. Why I put this in here though is that this shadow full price is over $20, whereas this one, or like right around $20. It's been a long time since I purchased, so keep that in mind. But it's like $20-ish compared to like $7. And so because of that, I think that the Clionadh one is a way better deal. And I'm, like I said before, not the biggest fan of Touch of Glam's service, and so I would definitely pick the Clionadh shade. These next two are dupes in the sense that they shift the same colors, but they are not the same quality. This is the shade A Lot from JD Glow compared to the Shine by SD shade Top Notch. And the Shine by SD one is less expensive and 10 times shiftier and more beautiful than the JD Glow one. So you can see they both have that kind of purpley base that goes to a deeper purple and then a little bit orangey gold, and this one goes green as well. This one does not. Also, the Shine by SD one has so much more shine. It is just gorgeous. I don't like black-based multi-chromes, but if I had to wear one, it would be this one like every time. And like I've established, I can't get shifts super well, and so I'm not sure how much of the shifts I'm going to be able to show you, but I promise that they definitely are there. And I would 1000% recommend the Shine by SD one over the JD Glow one, based on quality alone. Next up, we actually have, again, two Shine by SD shades that are duping themselves. So on first glance, you're gonna think I'm crazy because those are not the same. This shade is Raging Fire from Shine by SD. It's a black-based multi-chrome from the same collection as Top Notch. And it goes from like an orange to a little bit of a red to a gold and a green. This is the shade Daylight. It's very, very bright and neon looking, but you can see it's pretty transparent in the base. It's got a little bit of a gray base going on. Not the same, right? But again, we're gonna go into my handy dandy palette to prove a point. So with a black eyeshadow, if you want that punchy look that the black base multi-chrome gives, we're gonna tap Daylight over the top, and you can see suddenly they are so similar. And if you layer it up, you can get even more sparkle from it. And the colors that they shift are pretty much identical. This one maybe goes a little bit more red, but it does go to that orange, gold, and green as well. And I like this one even better because it can be worn different ways. So I would recommend getting Daylight over Raging Fire because you can get a similar effect but also have more versatility. Next, I broke my own rule, and this is depotted from a palette, but it's an indie brand and it's magnetic, so I figured I'd throw it in here just in case. This is from the Fairy Garden Fairies palette from Simply Posh. I really enjoy that palette. It's got some really beautiful pastel mattes, and it had some nice duochrome shimmer shadows as well. I wanted to compare it to Fairy Garden from Glaminatrix, so they definitely thought of the same vibe when it comes to the shade, and you can see they're really close. This one has a little bit more of a warm green, whereas this one goes a little bit more like cool in the base, but they both have that pink sparkle within them, and they're really close. Definitely don't need both. And if you're in the US and shopping from Glaminatrix is hard, it honestly might be worth it just to get the full palette and depot it from Simply Posh rather than buy singles from Glaminatrix. So here are both of those in comparison. Next up is another one that requires the assistance of a matte eyeshadow, but we are comparing Reserve number 5 from Shine by SD to Stormy Morning from Looksee. So we'll put the Looksee one in the middle. It's got a little bit more of a purple base, but it's a purple shimmer that kind of has a pinky gold sparkle in it as well. This is the one from Shine by SD. Very similar, but you can see it's got a lighter base. But if you add just any light purple matte underneath it, then suddenly you can get like the same exact shade as the Looksee one. So it really just depends on if you want versatility in your shadow. I feel like this collection from Shine by SD isn't really very expensive, and so I would honestly feel like this is the better bang for your buck compared to the Looksee shadow. Next up, we have two iridescent shadows, which are essentially the same. The first one that we have is Kitty Cafe from Copacetic versus Soda Swamp from Davina. And I would actually say to go with the Davina this time over the Copacetic because they are like the same exact shade. They are like that purpley kind of pink color that shifts to a gold, which I don't think I'm going to be able to capture. But the one from Davina is $8, whereas the one from Copacetic is $13. And considering how freaking close they are, I definitely think Davina is the better deal. And last but not least for this palette, we've got three that are insanely similar. So the first one that I've swatched is from Looksee. It's the shade Champagne Punch. That's that one. Then we've got Meteorite from Terra, and then Reserve number 2 from Shine by SD. And these are really close. So here are all of them swatched out, and you can see it's insane like how similar these three are. Out of the three, this one from Looksee is the cheapest, and the shifts in them are exactly the same. So if you were considering one of these two popular shades, this newer one from Looksee is a cheaper alternative. And I actually have a few bonus dupes that didn't fit in those other two palettes, so I figured I'd show off those really quickly. This first set is of 3, and these are color dupes but not texture dupes. So first is Milky Way from Sydney Grace. Next is, oh gosh, what is this called? It's a hollow shade, Eat the Rich from Copacetic. It's a holographic shade, which I don't think is really capturing on camera. And then last is the shade Ornamental from Clionadh. So all three of these have a pretty similar shift to them. It's a little bit more of a purpley pink with like a golden green shift in it. The formulas, like I said, are completely different, so keep that in mind. But because the shifts are similar, I thought I would show it to you just so that way you can kind of pick which one is your favorite and go from there. This one from Clionadh definitely has more colors in it. It's got this like kind of peachy orange gold that you see, and then it does go a little bit more of a greeny gold. This one is pretty much that like greeny gold that you see, and then this one has both in it and has that holographic sparkle, but it also is a little like uneven in the base. You definitely need a glitter glue with that one, and it's not quite as shiny as the other two. Next up, we have the Looksee shade Santa Monica compared to the Terra shade Half Moon. These are perfect dupes, but they're pretty close. I think that the Looksee one has more of that base pigment, whereas the one from Terra has a little bit less base, but the shift is very similar. You can see that difference in base right there, but if you added a matte, I'm pretty sure they'd be pretty close. And they both have that blue shimmer that goes a little bit like pinky purple on the edge, which I don't think I'm going to be able to capture. These two are spot on. though. This first shade is from Terra Moons. It's Terra Borealis. And the second is the shade, oh, what is this called? Hybrid from Looksee. They are the same, you guys. They are the same, down to even the texture is really similar. So this is that Looksee shade that I'm swatching now, and this is the Terra Moons one. And like it's true with the others, I feel like the Looksee one needs built up a little tiny bit to get to the same place as the Terra Moons one. But you guys, tell me that those are not the exact same shade. They are so close. So the Looksee one is $3 versus $8. Like has been true with all of my Terra Moons Looksee dupes, I would say the Looksee one is probably the way to go. This one is similar but not spot on, and actually shout out to a subscriber who pointed out this dupe to me in the comments of one of my videos. So this first shade is from Clionadh. This is the shade Trinket versus Looksee Gingerbread. So Clionadh Trinket has more of a kind of yellow-orange base, whereas Looksee is a little bit more of like a pinky orange base, leaning a little bit like coral, I would say. Let me smooth it out a little bit so that way we can see that base color a little bit more. So you can see the difference in those base colors there. They are both in the orange family, but this is much more yellow toned and this is much more red toned. But the sparkle in them is the same. So they both have a blue sparkle that you're seeing mostly, and then it does shift to a pink sparkle on the edges, which again, I'm just not sure I'm able to capture. It's so frustrating because for me, from where I'm sitting, it's plain as day, but then I look into the camera and I'm like, you can't see it. So I promise the shifts on these are the exact same. So it really is just down to preference. The Looksee one is a little bit more affordable at like $3 compared to I think like $7 for the US version of the price for the Clionadh one. So they're close, you know, the Looksee one is more than half off, but you know, all just preference. Now at least you know. Just like I know now, thanks to that subscriber. I can't remember your name, the comment was so long ago, but thank you so much for that. And last but not least, we have one that is kind of far off, but I figured was worth sharing anyways. This is the shade Watermelon Sorbet from Touch of Glam compared to Palace from Clionadh. The difference is that this one has pink in it, this one does not. But the shifts that they have are the same. This goes from like a peach to a gold to a green. This one goes from like a pink to a peach to a gold to a green. So they're really close, you know, in the shifts, which again, since it's hard for me to capture shifts, I'm not sure how much you'll be able to see. You can see that they both go to that gold there. I don't know if I'm going to be able, oh, you can kind of see the green a little bit. It kind of looks just gold, but it does go green on the edges, and the shifts in them are so similar. I don't think you would need both. And out of the two, I'm pretty sure that Palace is a really expensive shade from Clionadh, but I think it's still cheaper than the Touch of Glam one, and I would totally recommend Palace. Palace has become one of my favorite shades, and so when I figured out that they were pretty similar, I was like, oh, cool. Well, there you go. So that's the one I have to end off on you. Let me go wash off my hands and then we'll wrap up. All right, well, those are all of the dupes that I have for you today. Let me know down below, which do you think are the closest, which are the furthest off? Do you have any other dupes that you've found that I didn't mention today? And if you're that person who let me know about the similarities between Trinket and Gingerbread, shout yourself out down below. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed finding some more dupes to show you all, although I'm hoping to avoid it in the future. We'll see how it goes. But until I see you next time, I hope that you stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy. Bye!